The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty compound in Afghanistan when Maria Santos first stepped off the transport helicopter. The rotors kicked up clouds of sand that stung her eyes, but she kept her face calm and focused. Around her, the Navy SEALs moved with the practiced efficiency of elite warriors, their weapons ready and their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Maria looked different from what most people expected of a soldier. At 5 feet 4 inches tall, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, she seemed almost small next to the muscled frames of the SEALs. Her uniform was standard issue, no different from any other support personnel. She carried a basic rifle and a heavy pack filled with communication equipment. To anyone watching, she was just another tech specialist assigned to help with their mission. The team leader, Commander Jake Morrison, barely glanced at her when she reported for duty. He was a tall man with graying temples and 20 years of combat experience etched into the lines around his eyes. His handshake was firm but brief. "Santos, right? Communications?" he asked, already turning his attention to the mission briefings spread across a makeshift table. "Yes, sir," Maria replied simply. She had learned long ago that fewer words usually worked better in situations like this. The other team members introduced themselves with the casual confidence that came from years of working together. There was Rodriguez, the demolitions expert, who could make a bomb from household items. Thompson handled logistics and could find supplies in the middle of nowhere. Williams was their medic, trained to perform surgery under fire. And Davis, the youngest of the group, specialized in electronic warfare and could hack into almost any system. What none of them knew was that Maria Santos had a very different background than what her personnel file suggested. The file showed her as a communications specialist with basic infantry training. It mentioned her time at various bases but left out the crucial details. It didn't mention the 2 years she had spent with an elite Army sniper unit. It didn't mention the 47 confirmed kills she had made during 3 tours of duty. And it definitely didn't mention that she could place a bullet through a target's eye from over 1,000 yards away. Maria had requested the transfer to communications work herself. After losing her spotter and best friend in an IED explosion, she had needed time to heal. The paperwork got mixed up somewhere along the way, and her sniper training had been buried under layers of bureaucracy. She could have corrected the mistake, but something held her back. Maybe she was tired of being defined by her ability to kill. Maybe she wanted to try being just another soldier for a while. The first few days at the compound passed quietly. The SEAL team was preparing for a major operation to capture a high-value target who had been coordinating attacks on coalition forces. Maria set up communication networks, tested radio equipment, and made sure all the technology worked perfectly. She stayed in the background, did her job, and tried not to think about the weight of the disassembled sniper rifle hidden in the bottom of her personal gear. The compound itself was a study in organized chaos. It had been built around an old Afghan police station and expanded with prefabricated buildings, concrete barriers, and razor wire. The main operations center buzzed with activity as intelligence officers analyzed satellite images and intercepted communications. Drone operators sat at computer screens, guiding their aircraft over the mountains and valleys where enemy forces might be hiding. Maria found herself assigned to a small room filled with radio equipment and computer servers. The constant hum of electronics and air conditioning created a white noise that reminded her of quieter times. She worked methodically, checking connections and updating software. The other soldiers who came and went barely noticed her. She was just part of the background, another piece of the military machine. But Maria noticed everything. Her sniper training had taught her to observe, to catalog details that others might miss. She watched how the SEALs moved, how they talked, how they prepared their weapons. She saw the respect they had for each other and the confidence they carried into every situation. These were men who had faced death together and come out stronger for it. Commander Morrison ran his team with quiet authority. He never raised his voice, but when he spoke, everyone listened. He had a way of making complex tactical situations seem simple, breaking down problems into manageable pieces. Maria found herself respecting his leadership style, even as she recognized the assumptions he made about her capabilities. The mission they were preparing for was complicated. Intelligence reports suggested that the target, a Taliban commander known as the Ghost, was planning to move through their area of operations within the next week. The problem was that they didn't know exactly where or when. They would have to be ready for multiple scenarios, able to adapt their plans at a moment's notice. During the planning sessions, Maria listened carefully from her position at the communications desk. She heard them discuss approach routes, extraction plans, and contingencies for when things went wrong. Her trained mind automatically calculated firing angles and sight lines, identifying positions where a sniper could provide overwatch for the team. But she kept these thoughts to herself, focusing instead on ensuring their radios would work when they needed them most. The other team members gradually warmed up to her presence. Rodriguez shared stories about his hometown in Texas and his wife's terrible cooking. Thompson showed her pictures of his kids and complained about how fast they were growing up. Williams discussed the latest medical techniques he had learned, always looking for ways to save lives more effectively. Davis, despite being the youngest, had a sharp wit and could find humor in almost any situation. None of them asked her about her own background, which was just as well. Military culture had taught them to respect privacy, to let people share what they wanted to share when they were ready. Maria appreciated this unspoken understanding. She wasn't ready to talk about the missions that haunted her dreams or the friends she had lost along the way. As the days passed, Maria settled into a routine. She woke before dawn, checked all the communication equipment, and ran diagnostics on the computer systems. She attended briefings, took notes, and made sure that information flowed smoothly between the different units on the base. In her spare time, she read books, wrote letters to her family back home, and tried not to think about the rifle case that remained unopened in her gear. The compound had its own rhythm, its own culture. The dining facility served surprisingly good food, considering they were in the middle of nowhere. The small gym stayed busy around the clock as soldiers worked to stay in fighting shape. The internet connection was unreliable, but it worked well enough for video calls home and watching movies on slow days. Maria found herself thinking about her future more than she had in months. Her current assignment would end in 6 months, and she would have to decide what came next. She could stay in communications, maybe get promoted, and train other soldiers. She could apply for a transfer to a different specialty, try something completely new. Or she could go back to being a sniper, back to the job that had defined so much of her adult life. The question felt heavier every day. She had joined the army to serve her country, to make a difference in the world. The sniper training had given her a unique skill set, one that had saved lives by taking others, but it had also cost her something that was harder to define. Every successful mission, every confirmed kill, had added another layer to a wall she had built around her emotions. She was good at her job, maybe too good, and that scared her sometimes. Commander Morrison began including her in more detailed briefings as the mission date approached. He valued her technical expertise and wanted to make sure the communication plan was solid. Maria found herself speaking up more often, offering suggestions about radio protocols and backup systems. She was careful not to venture into tactical areas that weren't supposed to be her expertise, but she couldn't help noticing things. The intelligence picture was getting clearer. The ghost was definitely moving, and they had narrowed down his likely route to 3 possible corridors through the mountains. The SEAL team would position themselves to intercept him regardless of which path he chose. It was a good plan, but Maria could see potential problems that the others might not have considered. One evening, as she was running final checks on the radio equipment, Commander Morrison approached her workstation. The operations center had emptied out for the most part, leaving just a few night shift personnel monitoring screens and communications. "Santos," he said, settling into a chair next to her desk. "I wanted to talk to you about tomorrow's mission." Maria saved her work and turned to face him. "What do you need, sir?" Morrison studied her for a moment, his experienced eyes taking in details that others might miss. "You've been here 2 weeks now, and I've been watching how you work. You're good at your job, but there's something else. You move differently than most communications specialists. You observe things differently. Your questions during briefings show a level of tactical understanding that goes beyond basic training." Maria felt her pulse quicken slightly, but she kept her expression neutral. I try to understand the bigger picture, sir. It helps me do my job better. I'm sure it does. Morrison leaned back in his chair. I've been in this business a long time, Santos. I can usually read people pretty well. And my gut tells me you've got more experience than your file suggests. The moment stretched out between them. Maria had to make a decision about how much to reveal. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to explain about her sniper training and offer to help with the mission in ways that went beyond communications support. But another part of her held back, reluctant to return to that role and everything it represented. My file is accurate, sir, she said finally. I'm here to handle communications. Morrison nodded slowly, but she could see that he wasn't entirely convinced. Fair enough. Just remember that if there's ever anything else you think you can contribute, my door is always open. Good teams adapt to circumstances. And sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places. After he left, Maria sat alone in the humming room full of electronics, thinking about his words. She had a feeling that tomorrow's mission might test everyone's assumptions about roles and capabilities. The Ghost hadn't earned his nickname by being predictable or easy to catch. If things went wrong, the team might need every advantage they could get. She reached under her desk and pulled out a small notebook where she had been sketching the terrain around their target area. Her sniper training had taught her to visualize missions from multiple angles, to think about lines of sight and escape routes. The drawings showed elevations, distances, and potential firing positions that could provide overwatch for the SEAL team's operation. Looking at the sketches, Maria realized she had been preparing for possibilities that went far beyond her official role. Some habits were harder to break than others. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she had a feeling that her hidden skills might be needed before the mission was over. The compound settled into its nighttime routine around her. Guards walked their posts along the perimeter, their footsteps steady and reassuring. Radio chatter from distant units provided a constant background murmur. Somewhere in the mountains beyond the wire, enemy forces were making their own preparations, planning attacks, and plotting movements in the darkness. Maria finished her equipment checks and headed to her quarters. Tomorrow would start early, and the team would need perfect communications to coordinate their complex operation. But as she walked through the quiet corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling that communication support might not be enough. The Ghost was cunning, experienced, and desperate. When desperate enemies were cornered, they often did unpredictable things. In her small room, Maria sat on the edge of her narrow bunk and looked at the locked case containing her personal gear. Inside was the rifle that had been her companion through 3 tours of duty, along with the scope that had allowed her to reach out and touch targets that others couldn't even see clearly. The weapon represented a part of her life that she had tried to leave behind, but it also represented capabilities that might save lives tomorrow. She thought about her fallen spotter, Jimmy Chen, who had been killed 6 months ago. Jimmy had always said that their job wasn't about taking lives. It was about protecting the soldiers who couldn't protect themselves from long-range threats. Every successful mission, every enemy eliminated, meant that American soldiers went home to their families instead of coming home in flag-draped coffins. The choice wasn't as simple as she had wanted it to be. Maria lay back on her bunk and stared at the ceiling, knowing that sleep would be difficult tonight. Tomorrow would bring answers to questions she hadn't wanted to ask. The mission would succeed or fail based on how well everyone performed their assigned roles. But sometimes, assignments changed in the middle of combat, and soldiers had to be ready for anything. Outside her window, the stars shone down on the Afghan mountains with cold, distant light. Somewhere out there, the Ghost was making his own preparations for tomorrow. He didn't know about the SEAL team waiting for him, and he certainly didn't know about the communications specialist who carried secrets in her gear. By this time tomorrow, the mission would be over, and everyone would know exactly what Maria Santos was capable of when American lives were on the line. The pre-dawn darkness felt heavy with anticipation as the SEAL team made final preparations for their mission. Maria had been awake for an hour, running system checks and ensuring all communication equipment was functioning perfectly. The operations center buzzed with controlled energy as intelligence officers provided last-minute updates and drone operators prepared their aircraft for surveillance support. Commander Morrison gathered his team around the mission table as the first hints of gray light appeared on the horizon. The map spread before them showed a complex maze of mountain trails and valleys where their target might appear. Red pins marked confirmed enemy positions, while blue pins showed friendly forces. Yellow pins indicated areas where intelligence was uncertain, gaps in their knowledge that could prove dangerous. Latest intel confirms the ghost is moving today, Morrison began, his voice steady and professional. Satellite imagery shows increased activity along all 3 corridors. He's got at least 20 fighters with him, possibly more. They're moving in small groups to avoid detection, but they'll have to consolidate somewhere before crossing into Pakistan. Maria listened from her position at the communications console, her fingers dancing across keyboards as she monitored radio traffic from various units. But part of her attention was focused on the tactical discussion. Her sniper training automatically calculating angles and distances based on the terrain features Morrison was describing. Rodriguez pointed to a narrow valley on the map. If they take the northern route, we'll have good fields of fire from the ridgeline. Thompson and I can set charges on the bridge approaches, channel them into a kill zone. Williams studied the medical evacuation routes, always thinking about how to get wounded soldiers to safety quickly. Closest medical facility is 40 minutes by helicopter. We'll need to establish an aid station here. He indicated a spot halfway between the target area and the landing zone. Davis was focused on electronic warfare capabilities. I can jam their communications once we make contact, but they might have backup systems we don't know about. These guys aren't amateurs. Morrison nodded at each input, synthesizing the information into a coherent plan. Santos, I need communication relays positioned at these 3 points. He marked locations on the map. You'll coordinate from the primary observation post here, approximately 2,000 meters from the target area. Think you can handle that distance with your equipment? Yes, sir, Maria replied, though she was thinking about the distance in very different terms than radio range. 2,000 meters was well within her effective range as a sniper, assuming she had the right weapon and clear sight lines. But that wasn't her job today. Today she was communications support, nothing more. The team moved out as dawn broke over the mountains, painting the rocky peaks in shades of gold and red. Maria rode in the second vehicle, surrounded by radio equipment and spare batteries. The convoy moved carefully along mountain roads that were barely more than goat paths, everyone alert for the improvised explosive devices that had become a favorite weapon of insurgent forces. The landscape was breathtaking and deadly in equal measure. Ancient mountains rose toward a cloudless sky, their slopes covered with scrub vegetation and broken stone. Hidden in this beautiful terrain were fighters who knew every cave, every trail, every hiding place that generations of warriors had used before them. The Soviet Union had learned how difficult Afghanistan could be for foreign armies. Now, it was America's turn to face the challenge. After 2 hours of careful driving, the convoy reached the designated insertion point. The SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, unloading gear and establishing a temporary base camp in a cluster of boulders that provided natural concealment. Maria set up her communication equipment with the same professional competence she had shown at the compound, testing frequencies and confirming connectivity with headquarters. But as she worked, she was also studying the terrain with different eyes. Her sniper training had taught her to read landscapes like tactical maps, identifying key features that could affect a mission. The ridgeline Morrison had mentioned would indeed provide excellent fields of fire, but it would also expose the shooter to return fire from multiple directions. The valley floor offered concealment but limited mobility if things went wrong. Commander Morrison approached her position as she finished the initial equipment setup. How's our communication picture looking? All systems green, sir. I have clear connectivity with headquarters, air support, and medical evacuation units. The relay stations are functioning perfectly. Maria's voice was professional and confident, but inside she was fighting a growing sense of unease. Something about this mission felt wrong. The intelligence was too clean, too convenient. The ghost hadn't survived this long by being predictable, yet everything they had learned suggested he was following exactly the route their analysts expected. Either their intelligence was exceptionally good, or they were walking into a trap. Morrison seemed to sense her concern. Something bothering you, Santos? Maria hesitated for a moment, then decided to voice her instincts. Sir, this feels too easy. The ghost is supposed to be smart, experienced. Why would he move during daylight hours on routes we've been watching? It doesn't match his usual operational pattern. The commander studied her thoughtfully. You've been reading intelligence reports about the ghost? I like to understand the complete picture, sir. Know your enemy and know yourself. The quote was from Sun Tzu, a book that had been required reading during her sniper training. Morrison's eyes narrowed slightly. There was definitely more to Santos than her file indicated, but this wasn't the time to pursue that line of investigation. Your concerns are noted. We'll stay flexible and adapt as needed. That's what good teams do. The morning progressed with agonizing slowness. Drone feeds showed scattered movement in the target valleys, but nothing definitive. Radio intercepts picked up fragments of enemy communications, but the messages were brief and coded. Maria found herself checking and rechecking equipment that she knew was working perfectly, using busy work to manage the tension that came before contact with the enemy. Around noon, the first concrete intelligence arrived. Davis looked up from his electronic warfare console with excitement in his eyes. I'm getting strong signals from the Central Valley. Multiple radio sources. Moving in coordination toward the checkpoint. Morrison gathered his team for a quick briefing. Looks like we guessed right about their route. We move to intercept positions in 20 minutes. Santos, I need you to coordinate fire support and medical evacuation from here. You'll have the best communication coverage from this position. As the SEALs gathered their gear and prepared to move out, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She quietly opened her personal equipment case and removed a seemingly innocent black bag. Inside was a disassembled sniper rifle, broken down into components that looked like spare communication equipment to casual observers. The rifle was a customized M24, modified for extreme accuracy at long ranges. The scope was a Schmidt and Bender with variable magnification, capable of clearly identifying targets at distances that pushed the boundaries of what was humanly possible. Maria had carried this weapon through 3 combat tours, and it had never failed her when lives were on the line. Working quickly but carefully, she assembled the rifle behind a rock formation that concealed her actions from the departing SEAL team. Muscle memory guided her movements as she connected barrels, adjusted stocks, and mounted the scope with precision born of countless repetitions. Within 5 minutes, she had a fully functional sniper system ready for action. Maria established a firing position that provided an excellent view of the valley approaches while maintaining the communication equipment she was supposed to be monitoring. From this position, she could fulfill her official duties while also providing overwatch for the SEAL team, even though they didn't know she was capable of such support. The waiting continued. But now Maria felt the familiar calm that came with being properly prepared for combat. Through her scope, she could see the positions where Morrison's team was setting up their ambush. They had chosen well, with good cover and multiple escape routes. But they were also exposed to counterattack from higher elevations. Positions that a sniper could cover if needed. At 1,347 hours, the first enemy fighters appeared in her scope. They were moving carefully down a narrow trail, weapons ready, and eyes constantly scanning for threats. Maria counted 8 men in the lead group, all carrying automatic weapons and wearing the mixed military and civilian clothing typical of Taliban fighters. She keyed her radio. Command. This is communications. I have eyes on 8 enemy personnel moving toward Checkpoint Alpha. They appear to be advanced scouts for a larger group. Morrison's voice came back immediately. Copy that. Can you maintain visual contact? Affirmative. I have good visibility from my position. Maria tracked the fighters through her scope, noting their movements and equipment. These weren't simple farmers with rifles. They moved with military discipline and carried quality weapons. Professional soldiers who would be dangerous opponents in any firefight. More fighters appeared over the next 20 minutes, moving in small groups but clearly coordinated in their advance. Maria counted at least 30 men, all armed and moving toward the position where the SEALs were waiting. But something was still wrong with the picture. Where was the ghost? Intelligence reports suggested he traveled with a larger security detail, but she hadn't seen anyone who matched his description. Then she saw the movement on the ridgeline above the SEAL position. Sunlight glinted off metal as enemy fighters moved into positions that would allow them to fire down on Morrison's team. The ambush was about to become a trap, with the SEALs caught in a crossfire they couldn't see coming. Maria keyed her radio again, fighting to keep her voice calm and professional. Command. I have enemy movement on the ridgeline above your position. Count at least 6 fighters with what appear to be heavy weapons. You're about to be caught in a crossfire. Morrison's response was immediate and decisive. All units. Abort the ambush. Fall back to secondary positions. Santos. Can you guide us to safe withdrawal routes? Through her scope, Maria could see the situation developing rapidly. The SEALs were moving with professional speed, but the enemy fighters on the ridge were already taking aim. In seconds, American soldiers would be caught in a deadly ambush with nowhere to run. Time slowed to a crawl as Maria faced the decision that would define the rest of her military career. She could continue in her role as communications support, providing radio guidance while watching good soldiers die, or she could reveal capabilities that she had tried to leave behind, capabilities that could save lives but would change everything. The first enemy fighter on the ridge raised his weapon, preparing to fire on Rodriguez as he moved between cover positions. Maria's crosshairs settled on the center of the fighter's chest, her breathing automatically adjusting to the rhythm she had learned years ago. Distance: 1,847 meters. Wind: negligible. Elevation: 15 degrees down angle. Her finger found the trigger as naturally as breathing. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with familiar authority, and 1.2 seconds later, the fighter on the ridge collapsed without ever knowing what had hit him. The sound of the gunshot echoed off the valley walls, causing both friendly and enemy forces to freeze momentarily as they tried to identify the source. Maria was already working the bolt action, chambering another round, and acquiring her next target. A second fighter appeared in her scope, this one carrying what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. He was turning toward the SEAL positions, preparing to fire a weapon that could kill multiple American soldiers with a single shot. Her second shot took him in the head at 1,923 meters, dropping him instantly and sending the RPG clattering down the rocky slope. The other enemy fighters on the ridge were now scrambling for cover, trying to figure out where the deadly accurate fire was coming from. But Maria wasn't done. Through her scope, she could see the main enemy force in the valley beginning to react to the gunfire. Some were moving to flank the SEAL positions, while others were looking for the sniper who had just eliminated their Overwatch team. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they identified her position and began returning fire. Her third shot eliminated a fighter who was directing others toward a flanking position. Her fourth took down a machine gunner who was setting up to provide covering fire for his advancing comrades. Each shot was precise, calculated, and devastating in its effect on enemy morale and coordination. Commander Morrison's voice crackled over the radio, filled with professional curiosity and growing suspicion. Santos, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Someone just eliminated 4 enemy fighters with precision rifle fire. Do you have any intel on friendly sniper assets in our area? Maria keyed her microphone while continuing to track targets through her scope. Negative on friendly sniper assets. Command. But whoever it is, they're definitely on our side. Her fifth shot eliminated another fighter who was trying to coordinate the enemy response. Her sixth took down someone who appeared to be a leader. Judging by the way others had been looking to him for orders, the enemy force was beginning to break apart, their careful coordination shattered by the arrival of an unexpected threat they couldn't see or engage. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, filled with admiration and confusion. I don't know who that sniper is, but they just saved our lives. The enemy's falling back in complete disarray. Maria continued working, her training taking over completely as she engaged target after target with mechanical precision. Each shot was a small masterpiece of calculation and execution, accounting for distance, wind, elevation, and the movement of both her targets and her own position. This was what she had been trained to do, what she was exceptionally good at, regardless of how it made her feel about herself. Her seventh shot eliminated a fighter who was trying to escape with what looked like important intelligence documents. Her eighth took down someone who was operating a radio, probably trying to call for reinforcements or report the contact to higher command. By now, the enemy force was in full retreat, but Maria wasn't finished. Through her scope, she spotted movement in a cluster of rocks that the other fighters had been protecting. A figure emerged briefly, and even at this distance, Maria could see the distinctive clothing and equipment that matched intelligence photos of the ghost. The primary target was trying to escape while his men provided covering fire. The shot was over 2,000 meters. At the extreme edge of her effective range, and complicated by the fact that the target was moving quickly between cover positions, Maria had perhaps 3 seconds to make the most important shot of the entire mission. Her breathing slowed to almost nothing as she led the target slightly, accounting for his movement speed and direction. The crosshairs settled on a point in space where the ghost would be when the bullet arrived, assuming he maintained his current pace. It was a shot that required perfect calculation and a little bit of luck. The rifle spoke for the 9th time, and Maria immediately began working the bolt action for a follow-up shot. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's flight seem to take forever. A tiny projectile crossing an enormous distance to find its target. The ghost stumbled, then fell, his escape plans ending in the rocks of an Afghan valley. But the mission wasn't over yet. One of the enemy fighters had spotted the muzzle flash from Maria's position and was directing others toward her location. She had time for perhaps one more shot before she would have to relocate or risk being overrun by the remaining enemy forces. Her 10th and final shot eliminated the fighter who had identified her position, buying precious time for the SEAL team to complete their withdrawal and for her to pack up her equipment. As she broke down the rifle with the same speed she had used to assemble it, Maria could hear Morrison's voice on the radio, calling for extraction and medical evacuation. The fight was over, but the questions were just beginning. In less than 20 minutes, a communications specialist had eliminated 10 enemy fighters, including their primary target, using precision rifle fire from distances that pushed the boundaries of human capability. The SEAL team was safe. The mission was accomplished. But everyone would want to know how it had happened. Maria finished packing her equipment and resumed monitoring the communication networks as if nothing had happened. But she knew that everything had changed. Her secret was out, even if the full truth would take time to emerge. Commander Morrison was too experienced and too intelligent not to figure out what had really happened on that ridgeline. As the extraction helicopters approached their landing zone, Maria looked out over the valley where the firefight had taken place. Bodies lay scattered among the rocks, each one representing a threat that would never again endanger American soldiers. The ghost's reign of terror was over, his network of fighters broken and demoralized. But Maria felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. She felt only the familiar weight of choices made and lives taken. The burden that came with being exceptionally good at a job that few people could understand. The SEALs would want answers, her superiors would want explanations, and her carefully constructed new identity as a communications specialist would crumble under scrutiny. The helicopters touched down in clouds of dust and rotor wash, their crews ready to extract a successful team from a completed mission. But as Maria gathered her equipment and prepared to board, she knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The mission had been a success, but the cost of that success would follow her for the rest of her career. The helicopter ride back to the compound was tense with unspoken questions. Maria sat quietly among the communication equipment, her face showing nothing of the internal storm she was experiencing. Across from her, Commander Morrison studied her with the calculating gaze of a professional warrior who knew something important had just happened. Even if he couldn't yet prove what it was, the other SEAL team members were processing their own thoughts about the mysterious sniper who had saved their lives. Rodriguez kept looking toward the mountains they had just left, shaking his head in amazement. Thompson was checking and rechecking his gear, a nervous habit that appeared when he was thinking hard about something. Williams was quiet. His medic's training focused on the fact that no one had been wounded despite facing a superior enemy force. Davis was already working on his after-action report, trying to document events that didn't quite make sense. As the helicopter descended toward the compound's landing pad, Maria could see activity that suggested their successful mission had already been reported. Personnel were moving with the urgent energy that accompanied good news, and she could see intelligence officers gathering near the operations center, probably preparing to debrief the team about the ghost's elimination. The aircraft settled onto the landing zone with a bump that jolted everyone back to the immediate present. As the rotors wound down, Morrison stood and addressed his team with the professional calm that had made him an effective leader. Good work out there, people. We accomplished the mission and everyone came home safe. That's what counts. His eyes lingered on Maria for just a moment, longer than necessary. Initial debrief in 30 minutes. Make sure your equipment is secured and your reports are accurate. Maria nodded along with the others, but she understood the subtext in Morrison's words. Something had happened during the mission that required explanation, and he intended to get to the bottom of it. She had perhaps 30 minutes to decide how much truth she was willing to reveal. The team dispersed to secure their gear and clean their weapons. Maria went through the motions of shutting down communication equipment and packing away electronic components, but her mind was focused on the larger problem. Her secret was out, or at least partially exposed. The question now was how to manage the revelation and what it would mean for her future. In her quarters, Maria sat on the edge of her bunk and stared at the rifle case that had been hidden for weeks. The weapon inside had just proven its worth again, saving American lives and accomplishing a mission that might have failed without her intervention. But using it had also destroyed the carefully constructed identity she had been building as a communications specialist. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, already knowing who it would be. Commander Morrison entered, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. His expression was serious but not hostile. The look of a professional trying to understand new information that didn't fit established patterns. "We need to talk, Santos," he said, settling into the room's single chair. "And I think it's time for complete honesty." Maria met his gaze steadily. "What do you want to know, sir?" Morrison leaned forward slightly, his experienced eyes studying her face for signs of deception. "Let's start with the obvious question. That sniper fire that saved our lives today. Do you know anything about it that you haven't shared?" The moment had arrived. Maria could continue the deception, maintain the fiction that she was just a communications specialist who happened to be in the right place at the right time, or she could tell the truth and accept the consequences that would follow. "Yes, sir. I know everything about it." Morrison nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already suspected. "I thought so. Your behavior during the mission, your questions during briefings, the way you move and observe, it all pointed to additional training. Want to tell me what your file doesn't mention?" Maria took a deep breath and made the decision to trust this man who had led his team with such competence. "I'm a sniper, sir. 3 tours. 47 confirmed kills before today. Transferred to communications 6 months ago after losing my spotter. The paperwork got mixed up, and my sniper qualification didn't transfer with my personnel file." "And you didn't correct the mistake?" "No, sir. I needed time to figure out what I wanted to do next. Being a sniper changes you, and I wasn't sure I wanted to keep doing it." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, processing this new information and its implications. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different tone. The respect that one elite soldier offered to another. 47 confirmed kills. That's impressive shooting. Today makes it 57, I assume? "Yes, sir. 10 targets eliminated at ranges between 1,800 and 47 and 2,156 meters. The Ghost? Target 9, at 2,156 meters while moving between cover positions." Morrison whistled softly. "That's exceptional work under pressure. My team owes you their lives." Maria felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Morrison wasn't angry about the deception. He was trying to understand it. "I apologize for not revealing my capabilities earlier, sir. I should have been honest from the beginning." "Maybe. But I understand why you weren't." Morrison stood and walked to the small window that looked out over the compound. "Combat takes a toll on everyone, but snipers carry a particular burden. Each shot is personal in a way that other combat isn't. You see your targets clearly. You know exactly what you're doing to them." "Yes, sir. That's part of it." Morrison turned back to face her. "The question now is, what happens next? Word about today's mission is already spreading. The intelligence officers want to debrief you about the Ghost's elimination. Higher command is going to want to understand how a communications specialist managed to eliminate 10 enemy fighters with precision rifle fire." Maria felt her stomach tighten. The bureaucratic consequences of her actions were beginning to become clear. "What do you recommend, sir?" Truth, Santos. Complete honesty about your background and your actions today. You saved American lives and accomplished a mission that might have failed without your intervention. That counts for something, regardless of any paperwork irregularities. Before Maria could respond, another knock interrupted them. Davis's voice came through the door, carrying the nervous energy that meant important information. "Commander, you need to see this. We're getting intelligence reports about the enemy reaction to today's mission." Morrison opened the door, revealing Davis with a tablet computer displaying intercepted communications and analysis reports. The young electronic warfare specialist was clearly excited about something significant. "Sir, the enemy communication traffic has gone crazy since the firefight. They're calling the Ghost's elimination an assassination by an American super soldier. The psychological impact is enormous. Apparently, the precision of the shooting and the distance involved has convinced them that we have new capabilities they can't counter." Morrison glanced at Maria with raised eyebrows. "Super soldier? Huh? What else are they saying?" Davis consulted his tablet. "They're reporting that a single American marksman eliminated an entire assault team and their commander from impossible distances. Some of the intercepts suggest they think we have new technology or enhanced soldiers. Morale in their remaining units has dropped significantly. Any indication of how they're planning to respond? That's the interesting part, sir. Instead of escalating, they seem to be pulling back from planned operations. The psychological effect of facing an opponent they can't see or engage effectively has them reconsidering their tactical approach." After Davis left to continue his analysis, Morrison closed the door and looked at Maria with a new appreciation for what had happened during the mission. "Congratulations, Santos. You've just become a psychological weapon as well as a tactical one. The enemy thinks we have capabilities that we don't actually possess, and that gives us a significant advantage." Maria wasn't sure how she felt about being described as a weapon, psychological or otherwise. "Sir, about the debrief with intelligence. We'll handle it together. Your actions today were heroic and effective, regardless of any administrative confusion about your background. The mission succeeded, and American soldiers are alive because of your skills. That's what matters." The formal debrief took place in the compound's main conference room 2 hours later. Intelligence officers, mission commanders, and communication specialists gathered around a large table covered with maps, photographs, and tablet computers displaying various analysis reports. Maria found herself at the center of attention in a way she had never experienced as a communications specialist. Colonel Richards, the base intelligence officer, led the session with the methodical approach of someone who had conducted hundreds of similar briefings. "Let's start with the basics," Richards began, consulting his notes. "Specialist Santos, your personnel file indicates you're trained in communications and electronics. Can you explain how you were able to provide the precise targeting information that led to today's successful engagement?" Morrison intervened before Maria could answer. "Colonel, there's additional information about Specialist Santos's background that wasn't in her transferred personnel file. With your permission, I'd like her to provide a complete account of her qualifications and actions during today's mission." Richards nodded, his interest clearly piqued. "Please proceed." "Specialist." Maria stood and addressed the room with the same professional competence she had shown during her years as a sniper. "Sir, I'm a qualified sniper with 3 combat tours and extensive experience in precision rifle operations. Due to administrative errors during my transfer, my sniper qualification wasn't included in my personnel file. During today's mission, I engaged and eliminated 10 enemy fighters at long range to protect the SEAL team and accomplish our primary objective." The room erupted in surprised murmurs and excited questions. Several officers spoke at once, trying to understand how such a significant capability had been overlooked. Colonel Richards raised his hand for silence, his expression showing both amazement and professional irritation at the bureaucratic mistake. "Let me understand this correctly," he said slowly. "You eliminated 10 enemy fighters, including our primary target, using precision rifle fire from distances exceeding 2,000 meters?" "Yes, sir. Ranges from 1,847 to 2,156 meters, with target number 9 being the Ghost himself. Richards consulted a map showing the engagement area. These distances are at the extreme edge of what's considered possible with standard sniper equipment. What weapon system were you using? Modified M24 sniper rifle with enhanced optics, sir. Personal weapon that I've used throughout my previous deployments. And you were carrying this weapon while assigned as a communications specialist? Morrison stepped in again. Colonel, Specialist Santos was performing her assigned communications duties throughout the mission. Her additional capabilities proved crucial when the tactical situation changed unexpectedly. The questions continued for over an hour, covering every aspect of Maria's background, training, and actions during the mission. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in the enemy's psychological reaction to the long-range precision fire, recognizing the broader implications beyond the immediate tactical success. Major Thompson, the psychological operations officer, was especially excited about the enemy communication intercepts. The psychological impact of this kind of precise, long-range engagement cannot be overstated. The enemy believes they've encountered a new type of American capability, and that belief is affecting their operational planning. As the debrief concluded, Colonel Richards addressed Maria directly. Specialist Santos, your actions today were exemplary and effective. However, we need to address the administrative issues surrounding your qualifications and assignment. I'll be recommending a complete review of your personnel file and consideration for reassignment to duties that match your actual capabilities. After the formal session ended, Maria found herself surrounded by officers and specialists who wanted to discuss various aspects of her performance. The questions ranged from technical details about ballistics and equipment to broader strategic questions about sniper employment and psychological operations. Commander Morrison eventually rescued her from the crowd, suggesting they continue the conversation over dinner in the officers' dining facility. As they walked through the compound, Maria noticed that word of the day's events had spread throughout the base. Soldiers who had previously barely acknowledged her presence now looked at her with curiosity and respect. How does it feel to be famous? Morrison asked as they found a quiet table. Maria considered the question carefully. Complicated, sir. I joined the communications section to get away from this kind of attention. Now I'm right back where I started, except everyone knows about it. Would you do it again? If you had the same situation, would you take the shots? Without hesitation, sir. American lives were at stake. My personal preferences don't matter when soldiers are in danger. Morrison nodded approvingly. That's the right answer. And it's why you shouldn't worry too much about the attention. Good soldiers respect competence and courage under fire. You showed both today. As they ate, Morrison shared his own thoughts about the mission and its implications. He had been fighting in various conflicts for over 2 decades, and he had learned to recognize turning points when they occurred. Today wasn't just a successful mission, he said. It was a demonstration of individual excellence under pressure. You took an impossible situation and turned it into a victory through skill, training, and courage. That kind of performance inspires other soldiers and reminds everyone why we do this job. Maria looked around the dining facility at the soldiers eating their evening meal, talking quietly about the day's events and preparing for tomorrow's challenges. These were her fellow warriors. People who had chosen to serve their country, despite the dangers and hardships that came with military life. Sir, what do you think will happen next? With my assignment, I mean. Morrison smiled. I think you're about to get very busy. Word about today's mission will reach higher command levels, and they're going to want to understand how to best utilize your capabilities. You might find yourself back in a sniper role sooner than you expected. And if I'm not ready for that, then you'll get ready. Morrison said simply. Because that's what soldiers do. We adapt, we overcome, and we accomplish the mission. Today proved you can do all three under the most challenging circumstances possible. As the evening progressed, Maria realized that her carefully planned transition away from being a sniper had been permanently derailed. The mission had revealed capabilities that couldn't be ignored or hidden, skills that were too valuable to waste on routine communication duties. Whether she was ready or not, she was about to return to the world of precision rifle operations and everything that came with it. But sitting in the dining facility surrounded by soldiers who respected her competence, and appreciated her contribution to their safety, Maria began to understand something important. Her value as a sniper wasn't just about her ability to eliminate enemy fighters at long range. It was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, about being a guardian angel that enemies couldn't see coming. The weight of that responsibility was still heavy, but it no longer felt like a burden she carried alone. Morrison and his team understood the cost of combat and the value of exceptional skill applied at the right moment. They would help her navigate the challenges that lay ahead, just as she had helped them survive when the tactical situation went wrong. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, and new opportunities to serve alongside soldiers who had proven their courage under fire. The Ghost was dead. His network was broken, and American forces were safer because of the precision rifle fire that had reached out across an Afghan valley to eliminate threats that other weapons couldn't touch. Maria Santos was a sniper again, whether she had planned it or not. The only question now was what she would do with that identity and the responsibilities that came with it. 3 days after the mission that eliminated the Ghost, Maria found herself sitting across from General Patricia Hayes in the base commander's office. The general had flown in from Kabul specifically to meet with the sniper whose actions had created ripples throughout the military command structure. Outside the window, normal base operations continued. But inside this office, decisions were being made that would reshape Maria's entire military career. General Hayes was a compact woman in her 50s, with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who had earned respect through decades of competent service. She had commanded units in Iraq and Afghanistan, understood the realities of combat, and possessed the rare ability to see beyond immediate tactical successes to their broader strategic implications. Specialist Santos, the general began, consulting a thick folder that contained Maria's complete military history. You've created quite a stir in the past few days. Your actions during the Ghost operation have been reviewed at the highest levels of command. Maria sat at attention, uncertain about where this conversation was heading. Yes, ma'am. 57 confirmed kills across 4 combat tours, with the last 10 accomplished under circumstances that can only be described as extraordinary. Your shooting during the rescue of the SEAL team has been called one of the finest examples of precision rifle work in recent military history. The general closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, studying Maria with the calculating gaze of a senior officer evaluating capabilities and potential. The question now is how we best utilize your talents going forward. Ma'am, I'm prepared to serve wherever the Army needs me. General Hayes smiled slightly. I'm sure you are. But the Army has some specific ideas about where that might be. Tell me, Santos, what do you know about the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta? Maria felt her pulse quicken. Delta Force was the Army's premier counterterrorism unit, populated by soldiers whose capabilities went far beyond those of conventional forces. Assignment to Delta was considered the pinnacle of military achievement, reserved for operators who had proven themselves exceptional under the most demanding circumstances. I know they're an elite unit that handles the most sensitive missions. Ma'am, indeed they are. And they're always looking for soldiers with unique skill sets who have proven themselves under fire. Your performance during the Ghost operation, combined with your overall combat record, has brought you to their attention. The general stood and walked to a map of Afghanistan that covered one wall of the office. Red pins marked known enemy strongholds, while blue pins showed coalition bases and forward operating positions. The complexity of the conflict was evident in the dense pattern of markers across the country. The enemy is adapting to our tactics, General Hayes continued. They're moving away from direct confrontation toward more sophisticated approaches that require equally sophisticated responses. We need soldiers who can operate independently, make critical decisions under pressure, and accomplish missions that conventional forces cannot handle. I understand, ma'am. General Hayes turned back to face her. Do you? Because accepting an assignment with Delta means leaving behind any semblance of normal military life. The missions are classified at levels you can't imagine. The training is designed to push soldiers beyond their perceived limits. The operational tempo is relentless, and the stakes are always life and death. Maria thought about the past 6 months, her attempt to find a normal role in the military, and how quickly that attempt had collapsed when American lives were threatened. Ma'am, I've never wanted a normal military life. I joined to serve my country and protect my fellow soldiers. If Delta Force can help me do that more effectively, then I'm interested. I'm interested. Good answer. The general returned to her desk and opened another folder. Before we proceed, I need to address the administrative issues surrounding your transfer to communications. The investigation has revealed significant deficiencies in the personnel management system that allowed your sniper qualification to be overlooked. Maria shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I could have corrected the mistake at any time. The responsibility is mine. Partially, yes. But the system should have caught the discrepancy. Regardless of your actions, changes are being implemented to prevent similar situations in the future. General Hayes consulted her notes. More importantly, your commanding officers during this period have provided exceptional evaluations of your performance and character. The general read from a report. Commander Morrison states that you demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness, professional competence, and moral courage under the most challenging circumstances. He specifically notes that you revealed your capabilities only when American lives were at stake, and that your actions saved his entire team from potential annihilation. Commander Morrison is an excellent leader, ma'am. His team performed exceptionally during a very difficult mission, a mission that succeeded primarily because of your intervention. General Hayes closed the report and looked directly at Maria. Santos, false modesty is not a virtue in this business. You accomplished something extraordinary under impossible circumstances. Accept the recognition and move forward. Yes, ma'am. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. General Hayes called for entry, and Commander Morrison stepped into the office. His presence suggested that this meeting had been carefully orchestrated to address multiple aspects of Maria's situation. Commander Morrison, the general said, I've been discussing Specialist Santos's future with her. I believe you have some relevant input. Morrison took a seat next to Maria, his expression serious but supportive. Ma'am, I've worked with elite soldiers throughout my career. Specialist Santos demonstrated capabilities and judgment that place her in the top tier of military professionals. Any unit would benefit from her service, even if it meant losing her from your current operations. Without question, ma'am. Individual soldiers serve the larger mission, not the other way around. If Santos can contribute more effectively elsewhere, then that's where she belongs. General Hayes nodded approvingly. Morrison's willingness to support Maria's advancement, even at the cost of losing a valuable team member, demonstrated the kind of leadership that made him effective in special operations. Specialist Santos, the general said, I'm prepared to recommend you for Delta Force selection, pending your acceptance and completion of the required psychological evaluations. Are you ready to take that step? Maria looked at Morrison, who nodded encouragingly, then back at the general. The decision would change everything about her military service, but it would also provide opportunities to serve at the highest levels of military operations. Yes, ma'am, I accept. General Hayes made a note in her folder. Excellent. You'll be transferred to Fort Bragg within 2 weeks for initial evaluation and training. The selection process is rigorous, and not everyone who begins it completes it successfully. Do you understand what you're committing to? Understand? I understand that I'm committing to serve my country at the highest level possible, ma'am. Good. Commander Morrison will coordinate your transition and ensure that your current duties are properly transferred to other personnel. The general stood, indicating that the formal part of the meeting was concluding. Santos, you've already proven yourself under fire. The next phase of your career will test different aspects of your capabilities. As they prepared to leave, General Hayes addressed one final issue. The story of your actions during the Ghost mission has spread throughout the military community. You're becoming something of a legend among sniper units and special operations forces. How do you feel about that kind of attention? Maria considered the question carefully. Ma'am, I hope the attention focuses on the mission's success, rather than on me personally. Good soldiers work as part of teams, and teams succeed when everyone contributes their best effort. Another good answer. You'll do well with Delta Force. After leaving the general's office, Maria and Morrison walked through the compound as the afternoon heat began to give way to the cooler temperatures of evening. Soldiers went about their duties with the practiced efficiency of professionals who had learned to function effectively in a challenging environment. "Any second thoughts?" Morrison asked as they passed the communication center where Maria had spent the past several weeks. "No, sir. But I am nervous about living up to expectations. People are going to expect exceptional performance from someone with my reputation." Morrison stopped walking and faced her directly. "Santos, let me tell you something about expectations. The only expectations that matter are the ones you set for yourself. You've already proven that you can perform under pressure. Delta Force will provide new challenges, but they won't require fundamentally different qualities than you've already demonstrated." They resumed walking toward the dining facility, where the evening meal was beginning. The familiar sounds and smells of military life surrounded them. Conversations in multiple languages, the distant sound of helicopters, the mechanical noise of generators and air conditioning units. "Sir, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead. How do you deal with the weight of command, knowing that your decisions affect whether soldiers live or die?" Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "You accept the responsibility and do your best with the information available. Perfect decisions don't exist in combat, only decisions that are good enough to accomplish the mission and bring your people home safely. What about when things go wrong? When good soldiers die despite your best efforts? You learn from it. You honor their sacrifice by becoming better at your job. And you continue serving because that's what they would want." Morrison's voice carried the weight of personal experience. "Santos, you're going to face situations where there are no good choices, only necessary ones. Your job is to make those choices and live with the consequences." They found seats in the dining facility and continued their conversation over the simple but substantial meal that military cooks had prepared. Around them, soldiers discussed the day's events, planned for tomorrow's missions, and maintained the social connections that made military service bearable during long deployments. "Commander," Maria said, "I want to thank you for supporting my advancement. You could have recommended that I stay with communications. And waste your potential? That wouldn't serve anyone's interests." Morrison paused to consider his next words. "Santos, you have a gift for this profession. Not everyone can do what you do, and not everyone who can do it should do it. You have both the capability and the character to serve at the highest levels." The conversation was interrupted by Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams, who approached their table with dinner trays and expressions of curiosity about the day's meetings. "So," Rodriguez said as he sat down, "rumor has it that you're leaving us for bigger and better things." "Something like that," Maria replied. "I'll be transferring to Fort Bragg for additional training." Williams raised an eyebrow. "Fort Bragg? Huh? That's where some very interesting units are based." Thompson grinned. "Can't say we're surprised. After what you did for us the other day, it was obvious that communications wasn't using all your talents." Quote, "The group spent the next hour discussing Maria's upcoming transfer and sharing stories about their own career transitions. The conversation was comfortable and supportive, reflecting the bonds that formed between soldiers who had shared dangerous experiences and learned to trust each other completely. As the evening progressed, Maria realized that she would miss this simple camaraderie, the straightforward relationships that existed between soldiers who understood each other's challenges and supported each other's success. Delta Force would provide new opportunities, but it would also mean leaving behind the team that had accepted her capabilities without question or judgment. Later that night, Maria sat in her quarters and wrote a letter to her family. She couldn't provide details about her new assignment, but she wanted them to know that she was well and continuing to serve in ways that made a difference. The letter was carefully worded to avoid operational security concerns, while still conveying her sense of purpose and commitment. As she sealed the envelope, Maria thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, she had been trying to leave her identity as a sniper behind, seeking a normal role that would allow her to serve without carrying the weight of life and death decisions. Now she was preparing to join the most elite unit in the army, accepting responsibilities that would make her previous service seem simple by comparison. But she no longer felt the uncertainty that had plagued her during the transition to communications. The mission that had eliminated the ghost had reminded her why she had become a soldier in the first place: to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. and to serve something larger than her own comfort or convenience. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as she prepared for the transfer to Fort Bragg. There would be training programs designed to test her limits, evaluations that would probe every aspect of her character and capability, and missions that would require her to operate at the very edge of what was possible. But tonight, Maria felt ready for whatever came next. She had rediscovered her sense of purpose and found leaders who understood both her value and her potential. The ghost was dead, American soldiers were safer, and she was about to begin the next phase of a career dedicated to serving her country at the highest possible level. The compound settled into its nighttime routine around her, with guards walking their posts and communications personnel monitoring radio traffic from across the region. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the perimeter, new threats were developing and new challenges were emerging. When those threats materialized, soldiers like Maria would be ready to meet them with skill, courage, and the unwavering commitment to accomplishing the mission regardless of personal cost. Her sniper rifle lay disassembled in its case, clean and ready for whatever missions lay ahead. The weapon that had once been hidden was now openly acknowledged as a tool of war that had proven its worth under the most demanding circumstances. Like Maria herself, it was ready to serve again when duty called, and American lives hung in the balance. 6 months later, Sergeant First Class Maria Santos stood on the balcony of a safe house in Somalia, watching the sun set over Mogadishu through the scope of her rifle. The weapon was no longer the modified M24 she had carried through Afghanistan. Delta Force had provided her with cutting-edge equipment that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in precision rifle operations. The new rifle system could reach targets at distances that would have been considered impossible just a few years earlier. The mission briefing had been typical of Delta Force operations: minimal details, maximum responsibility, and stakes that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. A high-value target, with connections to international terrorism, was moving through the city, planning operations that could kill hundreds of innocent civilians. Intelligence suggested he would appear at a specific location within the next 4 hours. But the window of opportunity would be brief. Maria's role was simple in concept but demanding in execution. She would provide overwatch for a small team of operators who were moving to capture the target. If the capture operation failed, if the target tried to escape, or if the team faced overwhelming resistance, her precision rifle fire would be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The training at Fort Bragg had been everything General Hayes had promised and more. 6 months of physical conditioning, advanced marksmanship, tactical decision-making, and psychological preparation had transformed Maria from an exceptional sniper into something approaching a legend within the special operations community. She could now place bullets through targets at ranges that challenged the laws of physics, operate independently for days at a time, and make split-second decisions that affected operations across multiple time zones. More importantly, the training had given her a new understanding of her role in the larger military mission. She was no longer just a soldier with exceptional shooting skills. She was a precision asset who could influence operations that conventional forces couldn't touch, accomplish objectives that other weapons systems couldn't achieve, and provide capabilities that existed nowhere else in the American military arsenal. The safe house itself was unremarkable. A 3-story building in a neighborhood that had seen better days, chosen for its commanding view of the target area and its multiple escape routes. Maria had been in position for 18 hours, watching the streets below through her scope and memorizing every detail that might affect her mission. She knew the location of every parked car, every doorway that could provide concealment, every rooftop that might hide enemy observers. Her spotter, Staff Sergeant Michael Park, was a Delta Force veteran who had worked with the best snipers in the military. He handled the mathematical calculations that accompanied extreme-range shooting, while Maria focused on reading the environment and identifying targets. Together, they formed a precision team capable of accomplishing missions that no single soldier could handle alone. Winds picking up from the southeast, Park observed, monitoring the atmospheric conditions through specialized equipment. Gusting to 12 knots. That's going to affect bullet flight at these ranges. Maria adjusted her scope settings accordingly. The target area was 2,847 meters away, well beyond the range where environmental factors became critical variables in successful shooting. At this distance, the rotation of the Earth itself affected bullet flight, and calculations had to account for physics that most people never considered. Copy that. How's our communication picture? Park checked the radio equipment that maintained their connection to the assault team and the command center. All green. The team is 15 minutes out from their insertion point. Through her earpiece, Maria could hear the calm professional voices of the operators who were moving through the city toward their objective. These were soldiers whose capabilities matched her own, elite warriors who had been selected and trained to handle missions that pushed the boundaries of what was militarily possible. Team Leader Alpha's voice crackled through the communication system. Overwatch. This is ground team. We're approaching the target area. Any movement in the objective building? Maria swept her scope across the structure where intelligence suggested the target would appear. It was an old office building with multiple entrances and windows that provided excellent observation of the surrounding streets. Perfect for someone who needed to coordinate operations while maintaining the ability to escape quickly if things went wrong. Ground team, this is Overwatch. Negative movement in the objective building. I count 6 potential shooters on surrounding rooftops, probably local security. No sign of the primary target. Copy, Overwatch. We're moving to establish containment positions. Maria continued scanning the area, her trained eyes identifying threats and opportunities that could affect the mission. This was what she had been trained for. Not just the shooting, but the complete situational awareness that allowed her to serve as the eyes and protective angel for operators who were focused on their immediate tactical objectives. The waiting continued, each minute stretching with the tension that preceded contact with the enemy. Maria had learned to use this time productively, reviewing her range cards, checking equipment, and mentally rehearsing the shots she might need to take. At these distances, there was no room for improvisation. Every engagement had to be planned and executed with mathematical precision. At 1,923 hours, the target appeared. Ground team, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on the primary target. 3rd floor, northeast window of the objective building. Confirm identification from your position. Team Leader Alpha's response was immediate. We need 30 seconds to get visual confirmation. Can you maintain contact? Affirmative. Target is stationary, appears to be observing the street. Good shot opportunity if needed. Through her scope, Maria could see the man who had been the focus of months of intelligence operations. He was standing in a well-lit window, seemingly unaware that he was being observed by American forces. The distance was extreme, but the shot was technically feasible given current conditions. Overwatch. Ground team has positive identification. We're moving to intercept. Maintain Overwatch and be prepared for precision engagement if the target attempts to flee. Copy, ground team. I have the shot if needed. Maria settled into her shooting position, her breathing automatically adjusting to the rhythm that preceded precision fire. The crosshairs centered on the target's torso, accounting for the bullet drop and wind drift that would affect the projectile during its 3-second flight to the objective. But as she prepared for a shot that might not be necessary, movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Armed men were moving onto the rooftops around the target building, positioning themselves to ambush the approaching Delta Force team. The capture operation was about to become a firefight. Ground team, this is Overwatch. You have multiple enemy personnel moving into ambush positions on the rooftops around your location. Count at least 12 fighters, armed with automatic weapons and possible RPGs. Team Leader Alpha's voice remained calm despite the new threat information. Copy. Overwatch. Can you provide precision support to neutralize the ambush? Affirmative. Stand by for engagement. Maria shifted her aim to the nearest threat, a fighter who was setting up what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher on a rooftop 2,734 meters from her position. The shot required split-second timing and perfect execution, but it would eliminate the greatest threat to the assault team. Her first shot eliminated the RPG operator with surgical precision, the sound of the rifle echoing through the safe house as the bullet reached out across the city to find its target. Maria immediately worked the bolt action and acquired her next target, a machine gunner who was positioning his weapon to fire down on the street where the Delta Force operators would advance. The second shot dropped the machine gunner before he could fire a single round. Maria continued engaging targets in order of priority, each shot calculated to maximum effect on the enemy's ability to threaten American soldiers. Her training had taught her to think in terms of tactical impact rather than individual eliminations, focusing on disrupting enemy coordination and removing their most dangerous capabilities. By her sixth shot, the enemy ambush was in complete disarray. Fighters who had been moving confidently into position were now scrambling for cover, trying to identify the source of the deadly accurate fire that was eliminating their comrades one by one. The psychological impact was devastating. Facing an opponent they couldn't see or engage effectively. Ground team, this is Overwatch. I've neutralized 6 enemy personnel, including their heavy weapons. The ambush has been disrupted, but you may still face resistance from remaining fighters. Copy, Overwatch. Outstanding shooting. We're moving to capture the primary target. Through her scope, Maria could see the Delta Force operators advancing with the professional competence that characterized elite soldiers. They moved from cover to cover with practiced efficiency, their weapons ready and their movements coordinated despite the complex tactical situation. But the primary target had recognized the danger and was moving away from the window where Maria had been tracking him. Intelligence reports suggested he had escape routes prepared, and he would use them if he sensed that American forces were closing in. Ground team. Primary target is no longer visible from his previous position. He may be attempting to escape through prepared routes. We're entering the building now. If he runs, can you intercept? Maria scanned the possible escape routes that intelligence had identified. Most led to vehicles positioned in areas that were visible from her position. If the target attempted to flee by vehicle, she would have clear shots at ranges that were well within her capabilities. Affirmative. I have coverage on all likely escape routes. The next few minutes were filled with radio traffic as the assault team moved through the building, clearing rooms and searching for their objective. Maria maintained Overwatch, her scope moving constantly as she monitored both the building and the surrounding area for threats or opportunities. Then she saw him. The target appeared at a side door, moving quickly toward a vehicle that had been positioned for escape. He was accompanied by 2 bodyguards who were scanning for threats while he ran toward potential safety. Ground team, primary target is escaping via the south exit, moving toward a vehicle approximately 2,650 meters from my position. Can you take the shot? Maria centered her crosshairs on the running target, calculating the lead required for a moving target at extreme range. The shot was technically possible but challenging due to the target's movement and the presence of civilian vehicles in the area. I have the shot. Engaging now. The rifle spoke with its familiar authority, and Maria watched through the scope as the bullet crossed the distance to find its target. The primary objective of the mission dropped beside the escape vehicle, eliminating a terrorist leader whose death would save countless innocent lives. Ground team. Target is down. Primary objective accomplished. The radio erupted with confirmation from the assault team and congratulations from the command center. Maria had eliminated 7 enemy fighters and the primary target at ranges that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible, saving American lives and accomplishing a mission that could not have succeeded without precision rifle support. But as she began breaking down her equipment, Maria felt the familiar weight that came with taking lives, even when those lives belonged to people who threatened innocent civilians. Each successful mission added to a burden that never seemed to get lighter, regardless of how necessary the actions were. Park helped her pack the rifle system, his expression showing both professional admiration and personal understanding. He had worked with enough snipers to recognize the psychological cost of exceptional performance in lethal operations. Hell of a shooting, Santos. 7 for 7 at ranges that most people would call impossible. Just doing my job, Maria replied automatically, though she knew it was much more than that. Your job is being one of the best snipers in the world. Not everyone can handle that responsibility. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Maria looked out over the city where the mission had just concluded. Somewhere in those streets, families were going about their evening routines, unaware that a terrorist leader who had been planning their deaths was no longer a threat. American soldiers were returning to their base safely, their mission accomplished without casualties. The radio crackled with a message from Team Leader Alpha. Overwatch. Ground team is clear and moving to extraction. Outstanding support tonight. You saved our mission, and probably our lives. Copy, ground team. Glad I could help. But as Maria and Park made their way to the extraction point, she thought about the conversation she had had with Commander Morrison months earlier in Afghanistan. He had asked if she would take the shots again, knowing the consequences and the weight that came with exceptional performance. Tonight had provided the answer. She would always take